Welcome, welcome. Oh, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Movement Cafe. This is an effort of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, and we meet on every third Wednesday of the month talking about something that kind of really matters going on in the denomination around climate care, climate justice, environmental stewardship, all the ways that we talk about God's good earth and us as United Methodists coming to that work with all our faith and good heart. So today we are celebrating a very special anniversary. It is our 5th anniversary of being a movement, and you're going to hear a lot more about that, what we've done, what we're dreaming of, how it's come together, and how all of you are just like hugely part of that. And just I don't know. I feel very full of gratitude this morning, and hopefully you are too. So my name is Rashenda Fairhurst, and I live in Oregon, Southern Oregon, which is beautiful and sunny today. And I would invite you to share your name and your where you are in the world, maybe your home church or conference, whatever seems like a good thing to share about yourself. I'm also a global ministry earth keeper. And I also do other things. I'm an advisor to the green teams for the Pacific Northwest Conference and the Oregon Idaho Conference. And just really, really grateful for those that I get to share the work with. So welcome to our really good conversation today. We're going to be sharing about the movement, like I said, and we're going to be moving through different things today, and so I want to go ahead and just get us rolling. We're going to start kind of learning about our story, and what we're to help share our story is Reverend Pat Watkins, who's an ordained elder in the Virginia Conference of the UMC, and he was formerly a missionary working for the United Methodist Church General Board of Global Ministries as the first ministry for the care of God's creation. And so he is really well positioned in all his work to talk about kind of how this thing called the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement came together. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pat.
Thanks so much, Rashenda. So General Conference resolutions as early as 1980 have addressed environmental concerns, and at every General Conference since, including most recently, the last couple of General Conferences, a fossil fuel divestment movement. United Methodist Book of Discipline contains our social principles, the first of which is the community of all creation, which was revised at last year's General Conference. But the social principles, including the natural world, were written in 1972 and really go back as far as John Wesley. In the 1700s, Wesley had some pretty incredible things to say regarding God's creation. Our General Board of Church and Society is charged with the implementation of those social principles in society, and they've done that primarily through advocacy on Capitol Hill. So those guys have been about creation care work for a long time. Our Council of Bishops produced a document called God's Renewed Creation, a Call to Hope in Action in 2009 that connects environmental degradation and climate change with pandemic, poverty, and disease, with the proliferation of weapons and violence. And then in November of 2021, the same council produced another document, a climate crisis response from the Council of Bishops. We started doing conferences or summits, I think around 2010 or 2011 at Lake Junaluska in North Carolina. They went on for several years there, and then they moved to Atlanta for 2 years, to Washington, D.C. and Arlington, Virginia, to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then to Nashville in 2019, which was our last in-person summit. United Women in Faith, then UMW, established a green team in 2004 that lasted 2 quadrennia until 2012 to explore the possibility of incorporating ministries of creation care into the overall mission and ministry of what was then UMW. And in 2009, UMW sent a delegation to COP15 in Copenhagen. Their Mission U social action study for 2016 and 2017 was called Climate Justice, a Call to Hope and Action. And for several years now, climate justice has been one of two priorities for United Women in Faith. They are the only general agency of the church for whom creation care is that much of a top priority. But who is really surprised at that? Most recently, their Mission U study guide on climate justice was revised and published as a second edition, chiefly to be used by discipleship ministries as one of their lay servant ministries classes, all thanks to one of our Earth Keepers, Bob Downs. In 2009, Global Ministries commissioned a missionary assigned to the care of God's creation as the executive director of Caretakers of God's Creation, a Virginia Conference creation care ministry. Around 2013, Global Ministries established a global creation care ministry team made up of representatives from the 5 major areas of the world in which Global Ministries does mission. And this team attended COP20 in Lima and COP21 in Paris. Global Ministries also met with its environmental scholars, who were young people from African countries and the Philippines, to engage with them in doing projects on behalf of the church and God's creation. Then in 2016, Global Ministries created Earth Keepers, a training program for clergy and laity, requiring them and equipping them to do projects related to creation care and the church. Over this same period of time, our seminaries added creation care theology courses and have established ministries of their own to care for creation. One, in fact, has its own farm, and one has a class to teach its students how to preach sermons on climate change. And while all this history was happening, hundreds of local congregations established creation care teams, and even many annual conferences established teams. So all of this history and more, because I'm sure I'm leaving things out, means that the United Methodist Church has done a whole lot of very cool things in terms of caring for and healing God's creation for a very long time. And several of us in leadership now in the denomination decided 5 years ago that because we're doing all this really cool stuff, we needed an organization to serve sort of as an umbrella to hold all of these pieces of this work together to make us more effective. I remember several years ago when we started Earth Keepers, we shared it with Bishop O, who was then the bishop of the Minnesota Annual Conference. And he got so excited and he told us, he said, you know what y'all are doing? Y'all are creating a movement. And that's Wesleyan. That's what Wesley did to create a movement. And so that's when we thought we'd call this new thing the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And that's what we're celebrating today. But I want us also to celebrate this wonderful history of who we've been ever since the days of John Wesley, that have been at least somewhat cognizant of what's going on environmentally. So thank you, Rashinda.
Ah, thank you, Pat. That's absolutely wonderful. Like, woo! So yes, the movement, and of course, that's sort of been the nickname as the movement, as sort of emerged as a nickname for what we do here. What we're going to do next is kind of open us with a little bit of worship, have a little bit of a welcome worship moment. Laura Baumgardner and Christina Sinks are with us, and they're going to talk a little bit later today about the new worship coming out of this movement. But for right now, we're just going to lean into this opener. So go ahead, Christina. Amen indeed. Thank you. I liked the bird song. That's lovely. Ah, all right. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt now. And of course, folks who attend this regularly get to see Kathy as she's part of our cafe team with Don Lewis as well, and talk about the movement. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Rashinda. Thanks everyone for being here. How lucky am I that I got that nice calming moment right before I get to come on. As I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I realized we had kind of challenged each other to share a bit about who our story is. And I realized that my story, for any of you who know of Marshall Gantz, who writes about movement building, my story of self has become the story of us. It really, I can't tell my story without telling the story of the creation justice movement. And I think, I'm hope as I tell the story of the creation justice movement, I kind of have to tell a bit of my story as well. So that to me feels really connected to that movement story. And Pat didn't tell you, but he was the person appointed as the missionary to God's creation. And so that is indeed his story, which is very integrated with our story. So first, my story, I suppose, could start in many places. I'm a preacher's kid. Both of my parents are United Methodist, retired United Methodist pastors. So it was natural when I started to feel some concern and really deep despair about climate change, that I turned to my local church, that I started to get involved with some fear and trembling, to be honest, with a group that we started to call, we did a series called A Faithful Response to Climate Change. And that was really my first entrance into that, as I thought about where should I act? How should I deal with this despair that I was feeling? Looking at all the different places that I'm uniquely positioned, what is the place that I want to act? And in addition to all of the other places I could have acted, my local church and the United Methodist Church was really the place that I acted and that I continue to act, because that has been a very powerful place to be. So um, as I went from despair to engagement, I got beyond that despair, actually, to a sense of really exhilaration that there were so many places I could act, so many different ways I could get involved. I had to start to choose and pick, but I got connected, and that next step really was about getting connected and building relationships. So I learned about what was happening in Minnesota with the Interfaith Power and Light chapter we have here, and then got connected to Susan Mullen, who is with the Minnesota Annual Conference. And then we discovered this new thing called Earth Keepers that was hosted for the very first time in 2016 in Georgia. And there, one of the brilliances of that the Earth Keepers program, which we'll hear more about later, is not just that we all pick a project and that we take we learn about how to do concrete work, but we build relationships, we build connections. And those relationships are really fundamental for what has now become the creation justice movement. The next phase of this in my story and in the movement story, I would call beyond beautiful words. As Pat mentioned, our church has a lot of beautiful words about creation and creation justice and our relationship with it. But when we gathered for after the 2016 Earth Keepers training, it was determined that we should all gather again in 2017 at the next Creation Care conference. And that happened to coincide with the 2017 Climate March in Washington, D.C. So a number of us gathered there, and we were challenged, in fact, by John Hill, who was with Church and Society at the time, to close the gap between our words and our actions in the church. And so that we took that back. Because those of us in that picture there from Minnesota were in front of the United Methodist building there in DC, were challenged and invited to host the next Creation Care Summit. And we did that in St. Paul at Hamline University, and decided to kind of use that as our focus, that we would have a summit rather than a conference, that we were really going to focus on bringing leaders together from all the different parts of the church, and to really explore, to kind of live with this deep question of, in the midst of this crisis, what are we being called to do? How are we going to use the gifts of our individual gifts, but how are we also going to use the gifts of this denomination, of this institution, and what will that look like if we to do more with that? And I dug back through some photos, and this was one of the the fun ones of just kind of all of our notes of how we were thinking about acting and what would come next. And there were some elements of the creation justice movement that bubbled up even then in 2018, as we need some communication stuff. We need networks. We need to fill gaps between what is offered by the boards and agencies and what is needed. And so that really became the early seeds of the movement. And then in 2019, as Pat mentioned, we gathered in Nashville and had another really wonderful summit where we had some tours and we had lots of good conversation. And again, we were really strategic. You probably can't see the words on these, but it was just kind of, again, going back through memories of what we did. We filled out these orange sheets about our strategies and our goals and what were the next steps and what resources we needed and who would do them, like just really good basic organizing work. And there's on this other sheet, the white sheet there, you'll see something about a central hub of some kind. What would that be? What would that look like? And so we came out of that 2019 summit with a clear sense that we needed to create something new needed to be born. And also, and this is another really messy one, but I love this one because I ended up being really involved with the communications efforts, and this is the early ideas around what the communications work might be. And this is what movement building looks like sometimes is flip charts and whiteboards and all kinds of ideas being thrown around and planned. So the next phase really of this is the birth of this new thing called the creation justice movement, which we also sometimes say is not really a new thing, but a new network. And so as we came out of that, we talked about what it might be. We decided upon a name. We worked hard to think about what that logo could be. I want to call a shout out to dear Beth Bond, who was known to many of us, who we lost way too early in 2020, who designed our logo, was very instrumental in the early days of the movement and of our communications efforts. We identified ways that we would build these connections of all the different parts of the church, all the different institutional parts as well. And then we drafted a statement and created a website. And that all got launched in January 2020. So that's interesting to think of that's when it just kind of got launched into the world. And since then, this effort has continued to grow, and this information continues to grow on our website. So really the fundamental question that we deal with every day, as Rashinda mentioned, is what more can we do together? We are continuing to invite folks to join the movement, to find things on the website. There are numerous resources there. We just recently, you'll see on our website now, a new resource map where you can find, hopefully a little bit more easily, some of the enormous amount of work that's been compiled over the last 5 years. We have a number of work teams that we invite anyone who's interested in and participating, whether it's communications or annual conference organizing, advocacy, fossil fuel divestment, the coordinating team, the worship team, the solar team. We have a Wild Church network. There's a higher ed network, lots of ways to get involved. And we have a number of growing partnerships. Obviously, Earth Keepers is one of them. All of the different annual conference organizing teams that are out there. We then have all of these workshops, these growing partnerships with the annual conference teams, with the boards and agencies, with finally with all of the different groups that have supported the net zero emissions as well. So partnerships with the Love Your Neighbor Coalition and Interfaith Power and Light. And all of us together really are this movement. And so I will stop sharing and turn it back to you, Rashinda. I'm excited to see what more we can do together.
Yeah, that's like, woo! My goodness, 5 years. So pent up much? I think this is a pent up issue. People are really, really wanting to see it succeed and blossom in their churches, their contexts, and we're seeing that now. And, Kathy's talking about how this gets put into action, and we're going to talk about that next. This, like, taking this idea and putting it in action, making little bunny drawings. That was my favorite one. As you sort of say, what are we going to do together? Earth Keepers, again, is a great, if you're an Earth Keeper, I just want to give a shout out to Earth Keepers. Let us know in the chat. A lot of people in the movement are Earth Keepers. Let us know what your project is in the chat. This is all about putting this work into action. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kim Richmond. Kim Richmond is the, I don't have it up. She's the annual conference creation care ministry team leader in the Western North Carolina Conference. I think I got that all right. And there's so much more about her that I don't have in front of me, but we will post her links in the chat. And go ahead, Kim.
Thank you, Rashinda. It's wonderful to be here today. Thanks everybody who's joined us. I was asked to share a little bit about my call, and really mine happened in late 2016, and it was reading a book by Bill McKibben where I suddenly was smacked in the face and learned that what I thought was kind of nebulous was immediate and an existential threat to our world. And I have to confess, I almost couldn't breathe. I was almost into despair. I've got 3 children. I'm thinking, what's going on? And it was within a couple of weeks of prayer that I then felt a very strong call by the Lord to raise awareness so that others who were like me and who were uninformed could have the opportunity to learn where we actually stood. And so I began looking at things to learn more about this. And through that, learned what my denomination, the United Methodist Church, was doing and learned about Earth Keepers training. And so I went to the second Earth Keepers training, which was in August of 2017. And it was there that I learned that raising awareness is not enough. You need to move from raising awareness into action. And only through that will you be able to change that despair into hope. And so I went and was very fortunate. I went back, I learned a project. My project was to start a creation care ministry in my home church, which I did, in which it has taken numerous years for it to really bear fruit, but it is now more so than ever. But had a fortunate opportunity to become the coordinator for the Western North Carolina Conference's creation care team, which was fairly newly formed in 2020. And so our purpose within that team of volunteers, we have about 10 or 12 who are active, one of whom is Dawn, who is here with us today. And our focus is on helping local churches move into action. And so we raise awareness with them so that they understand the need, they understand the theology, they understand the opportunities, they understand the problems. But then we help them learn how to take that a step further, form a team, and to go into action. So, for example, at our annual conference, which is starting tomorrow, we have a workshop where we're going to talk about energy efficiency and raising energy efficiency, and how the General Conference legislation focuses on doing energy audits and energy assessments and move churches into action where they realize that, you know, they need to start looking and not just think, well, there's a problem there, but start looking as to how they can address it. And it may not be immediate. It may mean putting things into the budget, and in the next 5 years, here's what we can do. Can we transition to renewable energy, etc.? And then we're also focusing on rewilding our church campuses and trying to get straight up grass lawns changed into places where life abounds and where we have native plants. And so we actually are doing a 4,900 square foot pollinator garden at my home church, which we're using as an example for other churches, many of whom I think are already doing some things, but it is just that taking that extra step. Awareness isn't enough. We need to move into action. And the quote from Greta Thunberg, which we all know, the one thing we need more than hope is action. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then and only then, hope will come. There you go, Rashinda. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So just hear that in that story. Kim was minding her own business, hanging out in her church, and the truth of climate change just God brought it her way. Look, pay attention. We got to do something, right? And from her church, her local church, where a lot of us feel powerless, like nobody's listening, I don't know who to talk to. She is now not only leading as the coordinator at her conference team, but also help pass legislation at General Conference, and we'll talk about that more later. So your work, your efforts, like a rocket taking off for the moon, I promise. Okay, so I want to introduce very quickly Eric Walker to talk a little bit more about Earth Keepers. He's one of our newest trained Earth Keepers. He's amazing. He's on the Commission for Environmental Stewardship in the PNW, Pacific Northwest Annual Conference. I'm going to turn it over to you. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm starting my timer now, Rashinda.
Okay.
3 minutes, and oh my gosh, this could go in so many different directions, but I'm going to try and stay in my lane. So, Earthkeeper's coming up October. It's going to be in the Pacific Northwest. There's going to be a field trip out on the Sound to Vashon Island. You guys hopefully all know about Earthkeepers, and you have a job to do. You have a job to tell others about Earthkeepers. Recently, two young or newly formed Latino Methodist groups came forward and said, hey, we want to do something with creation care. And right away, we started talking about, well, there's Earthkeepers. So, but people can't always take the time or find the money to put it all together. So as Earthkeepers, our job is to help others who want to do creation care projects. So we've talked about it's important to act, but it's also important to take action that people can see. So one of the cool things about Earthkeepers is you have a project, and your project can be very visible, whether it's converting some parking to a greenway like they did in St. Paul, or a people's garden in Philadelphia, or in the Pacific Northwest. We did a survey in the annual conference to find the barriers to solar panel and heat pump projects. There's all different kinds of things that can be done in these projects, but remember, it's important that they can be seen, because when people see Methodists being Methodists, then we become disciples of Christ. They will know us by our love, right? Or Earthkeepers can lead to something really big, like what I ended up doing with my church, as we went to a full-blown solar and storage project. We got a grant for it through Washington State's Climate Commitment Act. We filed for and actually received our 30% direct pay check from the IRS. Pray that that keeps going into the future, but hopefully we can see it again. And our utility bills that you see in the lower right-hand corner have dropped to nothing for electricity because of this great project. So do things that people can see, and talk to each other within the movement, because you never know what kind of skills out there. I brought chasing grants from my paid life experience into this world, and there's money out there. You need to know where to look, and sometimes it's kind of hard to find, and a lot of extra energy. So do something that people can see. So Rashinda, that's the pitch on Earthkeepers.
Oh, that's marvelous. Yes. Eric is also a genius when it comes to some of this technical stuff. So I don't know, Eric, if you're willing to share your contact information for those who might help need that sort of work, but also send it to us. We have other resources here as well within the movement if you have questions or need support for that. We're going to hear next. So another kind of action, of course, is advocacy. Reverend Paul Slintz couldn't attend today, but he created a video about the advocacy team for the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. He is a United Methodist pastor in the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference and part of the Creation Care team in Tennessee Western Kentucky. And I'm going to share my screen and that video. And remember to share the sound, another important piece. And here we go with hearing from Reverend Paul Slintz.
All right. Well, greetings from this beautiful part of God's creation, Nashville, Tennessee. I want to thank Rashinda and the team for this opportunity to share a little bit about the Advocacy Working Group. First, briefly about myself. My name is Paul Slintz. I'm a retired elder in the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference. And my last appointment was as pastor for Creation Care and Environmental Justice for the conference from 2016 to 2020. I currently serve on the leadership team for the Conference Creation Care Ministry, and am on the coordinating committee for the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, and I am an Earthkeeper. The Advocacy Working Group came out of the 2019 Creation Justice Summit held here in Nashville. And our purpose is to encourage and equip United Methodists across the connection to be engaged in advocacy, primarily around public policy issues at all levels of government. Occasionally, we have also targeted corporations such as large automakers to push them in the direction of greater fuel efficiency and towards electric vehicles. The basic premise of our work is that harm to creation and to vulnerable people is systematic, and therefore efforts for creation justice must also be I should say systemic, and so efforts for creation justice must also be systemic. For instance, I can choose to put solar panels on my roof, and considering that, but I know that for a clean energy revolution to take place nationwide, federal and state policies and laws have to be in place that incentivize solar power for millions of people. In a similar vein, I would love to ride mass transportation here in Nashville, and do very occasionally. But when I tried taking the bus to the last church I served, it took me over 2 hours to get there. That's versus 15 to 20 minutes, depending upon the traffic, driving a car. So I think you get the point. Individual actions are extremely important, but systemic policies are essential. To do this work, well, there is a dedicated team of 10 people who meet monthly to discuss how we can be most effective in our mission. Every region of the country is represented, from large cities to rural, smaller town settings. Also, very importantly, we have representatives from the Church and Society and United Women in Faith, have worked very closely with them over the years. And we have had John Hill and Laura Kigwabi James previously from Church and Society, and now have Becca Edwards, who has done wonderful things with us. Liz Lee, previously from United Women in Faith, and now Ilka Vega. And so we work very closely with them. There have been two main ways that we have sought to encourage and equip fellow United Methodists for advocacy. First, each month we choose one or two action alerts to put into the monthly UMCJM newsletter. To do that, we first look at what Church and Society and UWF might be highlighting, but then we also look at other faith-based and secular organizations, including Fossil Free UMC, Interfaith Power and Light, Creation Justice Ministries, Citizens Climate Lobby, Sierra Club, and others. After looking over what other groups are doing, we then decide what we want the monthly action alerts to be. In making that decision, we also follow the guiding principles for public policy advocacy that the working group developed in 2021 after extensive conversation, and that was approved by the coordinating committee. Those principles can be found on the UMCJM website. The other thing we do from time to time is put together webinars that focus more on the how-tos of effective advocacy, and again, at all levels of government, federal, state, local, county, whatever it might be. Our biggest success so far was advocacy for comprehensive climate legislation at the federal level, which, after long, hard months and working with a large number of religious and secular organizations, resulted in the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act in August of 2022. As I'm sure most of you on this call know, that included the most ambitious package of policies to address climate change ever. Unfortunately, as you probably also know, that is now under attack. Many of the most important pieces were repealed in the House Reconciliation Bill passed in late May, including the elimination of rapid phasing out of clean energy tax credits, which are very important to move to a clean energy economy and society. So our main focus right now, in fact this very minute, is to urge the Senate to oppose killing those credits as they begin voting on their version of the reconciliation bill. So please be in touch with your senators and urge them to support clean energy credits for the sake of creation and for the sake of hundreds of thousands of good paying jobs. I think that covers our work fairly well. And by the way, we would love to have additional people on this working team. So if you're interested in that, please email me at pslents53@gmail.com, and I'm guessing that will probably be put in the chat. Thanks again, Rashinda, and the rest of the Movement Cafe team for the opportunity to share about this important piece of the United Methodist Creation Justice. And I hope this webinar goes well today. This cafe goes well today. Thank you again. Bye.
Oh my goodness. All the good work and all the good people at this work just lift my heart.
Rashinda has frozen up there. I will jump in until she's back with us. So
Yeah.
our next step in terms of who we had up is we were going to have a reflective moment and focus on the worship team. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina and Laura to take it while we wait for Rashinda to come back.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And hi, everyone. My name is Christina Sinks, and I am so humbled to be among all this amazing work that's happening. Before I get into kind of the worship team and what we're doing, I'm going to ask you to invite you to join with me in a call to worship from our brand new worship series that you'll hear a bit more from Laura about. But I'll drop this in the chat, and we can, if you want to unmute and do the responses with me, you can, or you can stay muted. Let's be in this moment of worship together. We've heard it said, take a lesson from the ravens. They don't sow or reap. Notice how the flowers grow.
They neither labor
nor weave. God makes the sun rise on bad and good alike.
God's
rain falls on the just and the unjust. Yet we know everything that makes our lives possible, the splints for baskets, roots for medicines, the trees whose bodies make our homes, and the pages of our books, is provided by the lives of more than human beings. Be glad in the beloved and rejoice, you who love justice. Exult, you upright of heart. Well, thank you, everyone. And that's written by our wonderful friend, Paul Mitchell, and is from our brand new worship series based on Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Serviceberry. And like I mentioned, Laura will share more about that later. But I wanted to start us off with the section about our worship team by sharing a bit about my call and how I got into this work as well. So it's my firm belief that when we leave church on Sunday mornings, we aren't necessarily leaving reciting the words of the sermon, no matter how good the sermons are, as I know there's many amazing preachers here today. But what we're carrying with us is the words of the hymns that have hammered home the impact of the sermon. And for me, this really rang true in my faith life growing up. I joined a church to sing in the choir. I didn't really care about the faith itself at that point, but it was the music that drew me in. And that to me presented the gospel of good news that I could really get on board with as someone who didn't see myself as part of as a Christian growing up. But ever since then, I've been fascinated with the power of music and liturgy and worship arts that allow the Spirit to bring about change in us. And I think this is true across the spectrum of theology and especially within justice work. But we know all too well that there are churches all around the world that each week proclaim theology that is weak and unable to move hearts, and even sometimes really dangerous, right? And this is particularly true when it comes to the climate crisis and our alienation from the land and the creatures all around us and our lack of knowledge of that land and our connection to it. And like I said, in part, this is driven by the theology that's harmful towards creation or even just neutral towards creation. And I know that we can do better. And I'll use the example from my church growing up. My church was the first place in the world that I heard and sang about queer inclusion, where we used female pronouns for God, and where we sang about bringing about economic justice and climate justice. And this changed how I saw the world. And so for me, I believe really strongly that harnessing the power of Christian music and liturgy and artwork for social transformation, that just really makes a big difference. And that's what roots deeply in us. And that's what gives faith communities kind of the edge, I think, in getting at people's hearts and spirits more than other organizations can do. So our dream with this worship team that's been operating now for 3 years is, what if churches were not behind the curve on climate justice issues, but kind of ahead of the curve, going along with all the amazing projects that were shared about and the advocacy work. We need to get that kind of worship element. And so what we're asked when we engage in worship practices that center creation care and creation justice is, I know that we believe that the earth is to be cared for, but what are we going to do about it then? And how shall we live? So this has just been kind of the core of how our worship working team has operated the last few years. Sorry, I see a message in the chat. Is it about me? Maybe not. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. Sorry. Uh, and what has come out of this work that I was asked to help lead back in 2022 and have had an amazing partner in the work, Laura Baumgartner, for the last 3 years as well. What's come out of this has been these amazing 7 different worship series that have been used across the country and around the world. And I'm just going to share a graphic. It's a little bit chaotic, but to me, it reflects kind of the wide variety of things that our team has gotten to work on. And like I said, it's been used around the world, but it's also been, these series have been contributed to by people around the world and across the connection, both clergy and lay people, United Methodists and beyond the Methodist Church. And so within these series graphics that you see here, we have had 5 that have been native to the United Methodist Creation Justice Ministries platform, and 2 that we have created in partnership with Discipleship Ministries, which is the United Methodist Agency. Is there another name for the agency? I don't know. You know them. They put out amazing resources, Discipleship Ministries, and some of those resources have been viewed by 20,000 people or more. And so we're very proud to have gotten to share about the work on podcasts, as well as, like I mentioned, kind of the broad diversity of people and topics that we've gotten to include, because we know that climate justice work isn't just about climate justice, but it's about the intersectionality and the kind of the ways that all of who we are ties into this work. And so I'll pass it over to Laura to share about what we're working on now and some other things.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you all for being here. It is a joy to be together and to get to even have some worship moments together today. So I just wanted to share that I've done all 7 of those worship series with my congregation, and I'm a pastor in Seattle. And so some of the moments where those worship series really connected with people in my congregation were very powerful. Every time we have a new series, we have ways to engage for the congregation. And so one of the first ones that we came up with was around the burning bush. And so every week, congregation members had flames that they received in their bulletins, and they wrote their prayers on flames and added them to the burning bush that was helping to ignite us all for what we would do, to the actions that we would take that would come out of the worship series. Similarly, last year we had a worship series that had fig trees. And so every week, congregation members would write their action items on items that would go on the fig tree. So one week it was figs, and one week it was leaves, and one week it was birds that were in the tree. And so we had this amazing tree that got formed of all of the ways that we were feeling called to act coming out of these series. And so I would encourage you, if you are part of a worship team, to check out the series that already exists, and also to get involved. We have a new series that will be released, we hope, July 1. If not July 1, it'll be very soon after that. That is for the September season of creation in 2025, again, based on Robin Wall Kimmerer's The Service Berry. And if you're interested in being part of the worship team, we always love new members, and I'm putting my email in the chat so that you can get in contact with us, and you can get your name added to our amazing author list. And a big shout out to the authors who are here today. We have lots of them in attendance. So thank you so much, and back to Rashenda.
Okay, so wonderful. Yes, I see a few people too here. Shout out to Ross and to Laura and Christina and all the people who have contributed in the past to these wonderful worship series. Okay, so it is my part next, and I did drop out earlier. I don't know if anybody noticed that. So Kathy, can you share? Are you set to share the PowerPoint?
I'm going to try to do that. I will go ahead right now. You start talking.
Okay, perfect. And so we're just going to hedge our bets a little so that Kathy's going to go ahead and share. But what my role here today is to celebrate the season of creation and sorry, my brain is two places now. The General Conference. I'm also celebrating Season of Creation because, of course, that was so much fun to be part of that. Okay, let me start with this guy. So this is a leopard frog near a conservation section of the Ottawa River in Canada called the Britannia Conservation Area, a small saved patch of earth from what was once a wilderness behind our home when I was a little girl. It still fills my heart, a maple forest with ponds and the Ottawa River, and there was so much wildlife, frogs and caterpillars and snakes and beavers and rabbits and foxes and deer and birds, and it was an amazing place to just run and be wild. And the years I spent pocketing snakes and frogs and hiding turtles in my room brought me to a deep sense of how unbelievably, perhaps unbearably precious God's creation is, this earth. And it helped me understand deeply also that I am part of the forest. So as a grown-up, I learned about pollution and climate change, and in learning the truth of where we really are, where we were headed, and what we were already seeing, it just cut deep. So information such as what it is in charts, next slide. Yeah, so in charts like this, these are charts I use to try to communicate with other folks, as you can see that. So this type of information, this one shows my beloved Oregon and the rising temperatures we can expect. And I like to mark the Dust Bowl because, you know, that's actually not the direction we should be heading. This is my way of trying to communicate that we cannot stand next to this kind of sin and say nothing. So God calls me to this work. Next slide. So here I am. My other part here is to celebrate the work of the movement as it culminated in the tremendous outcome of General Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina last year. The movement was formed in part to address the gap between what United Methodists claimed to believe and what they actually did, and Kathy talked about that. Turning words into action, which Kim also talked about, and Eric. So the next few slides are going to go by fast, so be ready. Next one. General Conference Vigil kicked off with an Earth Day. This was our first thing of the conference. There's Pat Watkins in the center, texting like a teenager. It was helped to be organized by United Women in Faith, and Dan Jurenko at the bottom leads the candlelight prayer. Next slide. Our legislation was very well received. Here's what passed in no particular order. We passed a mandate for a caretaker of God's creation in every annual conference. The legislation submitted by J.D. Hansen. Stay on that. And go to the next slide. Kim Richmond wrote and submitted legislation on church land use, encouraging native plants and faithful land stewardship. Next slide. Chris Zinkowitz submitted legislation to form green teams at every level, including adding the ministry by name into the Book of Resolutions and Book of Discipline. She is one of the first trained global ministry Earth Keepers, and many members of the movement being Earth Keepers. We also celebrated at the Earth Keeper dinner at General Conference dinner and gathering. Next slide. Reverend Nancy Blade submitted legislation calling for sustainable practices when United Methodists are conferencing together, such as at annual conference. Next slide. Bob Downs has been champion to the road to net zero, and his legislation resulted in a commitment by the body to work to achieve the net zero goal. Next slide. Pastor Ian Uriola, a young adult delegate, submitted 3 resolutions, all to address mobilizing to get clean energy into our churches and address carbon pollution. Next slide. A happy surprise came from German Central Conference, where Bishop Harold Ruckert submitted a petition to reduce plastic use, which also passed. Next slide. Then there was all the work that came alongside the efforts of the movement that included movement members, oftentimes including Reverend Mark Davies, who is a leader and contributor to the new section of the social principles that speaks to our faith called the Community of All Creation, and other legislation also. The movement cheered on those doing the work, including the General Board of Church and Society, United Methodist Women, Methodist Federation for Social Action, and General Commission on Religion, Race, and others. Next slide. Fossil Free UMC is also part of the movement, and shout out to convener Reverend Sharon Delgado. Fossil Free had a single focus with legislation to screen out fossil fuels from the denomination's investment portfolios. Next slide. The divestment effort started in 2016 at the General Conference, but it lapsed during the pandemic, but we picked up strong for 2024. Over 700 individuals, local churches, green teams, and organizations signed the petition asking Westpath to divest. Next slide. Methodists joined with Green Faith and others for a march and day of witness, calling out Bank of America and other big banks for financing pipelines and other fossil fuel projects during General Conference. And that was a fun day. Next slide. And we all did some long time in committees for all the legislation. These photos are the fossil-free UMC group, but many of us packed into the observer sections for how many days? 4, 5. At the fossil-free group, we were with 4 packed in, and there were 4 or 5 Westpath executives and members of council on administration and finance. And we all get to know each other a lot better when you're like 6 inches from each other for 5 days. And we almost prevailed at fossil-free UMC. We missed it by like 2 or 3 votes. But the really good things that came out of this were included things like that Westpath be intentional with its divestment concerns, that the social value funds be truly fossil free, and divested funds will now be included as a life stage option that's being rolled out. United Methodist Foundations are also responding to divested funds. They're making those available for local churches and conferences. A number of conferences have already, well, a few conferences have already voted to divest their monies, and that's only going to grow. And there are continuing divestment specific summits, task forces, legislation moving in and getting started. Next slide. So happy anniversary to the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. Y'all get 5 stars. And that is my presentation. So stop share. Woo! That was so reporty. I wanted it to go by. We could keep moving, but look, my goodness, all that was chutzpah, right? It's like, oh, I think I'm going to write a resolution, bring it before General Conference. And the body of the conference wanted that. They said yes over and over and over again. So this is the work we can do together. Okay, so I'm going to turn it now over to Karen McElfish, who was a delegate at General Conference. She's also a leader in the United Women of Faith, and has been, she's an earth keeper. She's been part of the movement since its inception. So go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Rashenda. So I'm going to share a little bit of my story as well and how this fits in. In 2019, I was asked by then United Methodist Women to attend a pre-conference event prior to the summit in Nashville. And while there, we were basically starting to kick off our Just Energy for All campaign. Stayed for the summit, and part of my work at the summit was with a small group of people trying to organize annual conferences. I too had one of those nice orange sheets that Kathy showed. We were filling ours out with, all right, who do we know in which annual conference, and are they doing anything? And what are they doing? That work became my Earthkeeper project. When we started to kind of regroup, when the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement began to group in 2020, annual conference organizing was one of our first work groups. We have worked on a variety of projects, some of which you've already heard about. Early on, Dan Jurenko, Paul Slentz, Pat Watkins, Bob Downs, I think J.D. Hansen had a role in that as well, developed a webinar series. It's 7 webinars that talk about how you can organize your annual conference team as a green team or climate justice or creation care team. We then moved on to organizing our annual conferences by jurisdictions, and that started probably in 22. So it's been about 3 years now that we've been working on this, that our annual conferences meet as jurisdictions so that we can share some of the work that we're doing in each of our annual conferences, best practices, ideas that could be utilized, geographic similarities, and so on. We moved on to figuring out how do we reach out to our bishops to encourage them. So a small group of us worked on letters to the bishops, reaching out to our bishops, encouraging and cajoling them to be partners and allies in this effort. That led to working on resolutions, both for annual conferences as well as for General Conference. And I had the great pleasure of serving as a General Conference delegate and seeing those resolutions pass, and that was really exciting. Our annual conference resolutions, we have model resolutions on the website. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at those, they range everything from green team formation to church land use to energy audits to net zero to just partnerships, a whole range of things. And those resolutions are written so that you can take them in your own annual conference, modify them, hopefully only slightly as necessary, so that they would be of a fit for your work in your own annual conference. Most recently, we've been working with the Board of Church and Society. One of the other things that you already heard about that came out of General Conference was that every annual conference shall have, that is the wording, shall have a caretaker of God's creation coordinator. And so we've been working with Church and Society on how best to implement that, how to encourage that in each of the different annual conferences. We wrote a model job description, which is on our webpage. We wrote a timeline for implementation, how you might go about nominating such an individual, equipping such an individual, and helping such an individual put together a team. We certainly want to extend the work not only from the conference level, but also to district levels and local levels. So a lot of what we focus on can very easily be translated at each of the different levels. So that is a little bit of a nutshell of our work that we've done at the annual conference organizing team.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so we are going to break out into breakout teams, but I want to tell you a quick little story. Okay, remember when Mount St. Helens blew up? Kablooey? We remember it over here in Oregon and Washington, but it was national news, and the whole side of the mountain blew off and ash rained everywhere, and it covered the trees and the landscapes, and it was like deep. And how on earth are we going to make this work? How do we bring life back? What's going to happen here? And a group of scientists had a bunch of gophers, and they did an experiment. They took those gophers and they dropped them in little areas. They cordoned off these little areas. Each area got a gopher for 24 hours. And the gophers went to town in the ash, in this desert wasteland volcanic aftermath. Then they pulled them out. Okay, come back, little gophers. The areas that had the gophers were so much more lush, recovered so much more quickly, ended up being, it was a resounding success, and it was only 24 hours. So as we start thinking about, oh my gosh, landscape's changing, we worked so hard to get these solar credits. When we start saying, gosh, what is wrong with the bishop in my particular annual conference? We're not getting this work done, or why is it so hard to do this? Be sure to celebrate all our bishops, by the way, who are doing wonderful things. As we get this dismay where we feel like, oh, we're going backwards, remember those gophers, 24 hours, and the difference that it made. So every time we do this work, we're that gopher every single time. And so anyway, I just wanted to drop that as a way of celebrating God's good creation, because God's creation is marvelous. All right. So we have breakout rooms, and I'm going to introduce, we're going to have 4 people who are going to be leading breakout rooms. Kim Richmond will lead a breakout room, and she's going to be kind of talking about what she talked about, that, well, share, and you're invited to share a conversation around how to put hope into action, how to get projects, sort of, what have you been doing? What kind of project would you like? And you get to choose which room you would like, and that's been launched. So go ahead and choose rooms. Reverend Pat Watkins will be leading a room. We're talking about, do you feel a call to this work? Do you feel a call to creation justice and want to talk to somebody about that? Well, Pat is going to be available for that conversation. Breakout room 3, Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt. She's going to be talking about your dreams for the future. Come share what your dreams are for the future, where you can be part of the movement, or how you as part of the movement can deepen what you're doing and connect for the next 5 years to be successful. And Karen McElfish will also be sharing in having conversation in a breakout room, talking about getting plugged in for annual conference, at your annual conference, potentially for those who want to see how connection with United Methodist Creation Justice Movement could help in furthering action in your own conference, with a lot of shared team perspectives. So please go ahead and choose one of those 4 folks. Don and I are here to help you. Oh, here they come. Yep, yeah, here we go. This is the tsunami of return right here. So we have just, oh, Marty, you're going like this. I love it. That tells me some good stuff in your room. That's wonderful. I was going to say, does anybody want to just share? We have time for a couple people to share about how that went. And Cara and I had kind of pinged you. Did you want to share at all about how that went and what
Sure,
your
yeah, we
thoughts
had
are?
some good discussion about ways to organize, how best to reach churches. So, for example, organizing district teams, so that you're a little closer to the boots on the ground. We talked about there are different ways that your annual conference may identify who the coordinator is. It may be that that person is already the chair of your creation justice team or your green team, whatever you're calling it. Or it may be that the bishop will appoint somebody, or that through some other process within the conference. It may not necessarily be a paid person. It may be somebody who is volunteering in that position. Ideally, we'd love it ultimately to be paid everywhere if possible, but we work with what we've got. So those are some of the highlights that came out of our discussions.
Oh, that's awesome, Karen. Thank you. Pat, do you want to share it all? I mean, I remember this call in my heart and wondering where to put that, where that fit. Do you want to share anything about that from your group?
Yeah, well, so everybody in our group has already felt a call. So it's not like we were helping anyone kind of be called, but the discussion, and maybe it's because of my bias here, but the discussion went in the theological direction, and we had some discussion about some frustration. How do you get the whole congregation on board? And that was parallel to some of our frustrations, Rashinda, about how do we get the whole denomination on board, and how do we get the whole council of bishops on board. And so theology maybe is one approach to do that, because we're all Christians in the church. And so if we can somehow know and understand biblical theology well enough and be able to articulate it very well to our congregations, then I think maybe that can help to bridge the gap. I mentioned that there are a lot of environmentalists out there that are sitting in our pews, but they don't make the connection between their passion for the environment and their Christian faith. And so how we can put that together, I think, could be helpful for congregations and helpful for the whole denomination going forward.
Amen. I think, the tools, so many ways to have this conversation. Kim, did you want to just share for a minute about how things went in your?
Sure, we had 7 of us in there and we had lively discussion. We just shared, we had a few people expressing frustration because they were having a hard time getting their local churches engaged. And we had a number of people who spoke up and offered ideas for them. And seemed to be some clicking going on where it at least was helpful in getting them thinking in the right direction. And I told them, and we're here. We will be glad to help on a personal church by church basis. So just reach out. You can go through the Creation Justice Movement webpage and they'll connect you. So we had a good chat.
That's awesome. And just so you know, you do really have support in this group for green teams. Chris Inkwitz, Kim Richmond, Grace Pugh Hubbard, Mel Caraway has been leading teams in Texas for a long time. There's tremendous support here for that really difficult question of how do I get my local church to really be present to this work. We're going to, in just a few minutes, share a final prayer, and Don Lewis will be leading that prayer for us. But before then, I want to ask Kathy, she was another group leader, if she could just share how things went in her group.
Yeah, thanks. So just as we got cut off, Ankur Tankar was telling us about the work that he's doing in the Methodist Church in India, how he recently had a gathering with 700 youth, all focused on creation justice and creation work, and the training that he's doing as a youth minister. I want to know more, Ankur, so we'll get back to you soon, and maybe there'll be a whole movement cafe looking into what you're up to there. Very inspiring. Lois Knowlton told us how the CalPAC conference just passed fossil fuel divestment with 89% support, even though it was just presented at the very last minute. We'll be doing more of that, this vision for the future of that. John Pitney talked about the importance of the networking to support the solar work and the organizing tools that he's had in the past. Beth Gilbert talked about how she is using the Loving People and Planet curriculum that was done to teach that through beadisciple.com. And we're going to get the details on that so that you all can know about it and offer it and then teach it in your conferences. Joan Pell talked about how she's doing that work in the Cal Nevada work and in trying to get more churches involved in terms of communication, and Mary Beth and Kathleen also about building networks to support advocacy, to support interdenominational work. Anyway, it was very exciting to know that this movement is continuing to grow and will be bearing fruit in the near future. So stay tuned. We got a lot of good work that is underway.
Awesome. Yeah, and we're just about out of time. I'm posting the Gopher story link. So if you want to read about that gopher or share it with your congregations, that we are mighty even in 24 hours if we are very small and furry. So I'm going to also, I see Mel, you have your hand up. Would you like to share for just a minute?
Yeah, reporting back from Karen's group, we learned that Desert Southwest passed fossil free also.
Yippee! Yay.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're doing with the different teams. Again, reach out to us, find a team. We want to welcome you. The sort of logging, like what's getting passed in these annual conferences, and it's just it's just so heartening to see. Okay, so we are just at the end. We like to end on time, which is one of our things. And so I'm going to turn it over to Don Lewis, who is going to pray us out.
Thank you, Rashenda. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here and everybody who shared the story of the movement. It's so inspiring to see all the people that made this and created this amazing organization that has grown and expanded, and it's doing such powerful work. And we can kind of all stand on the shoulders of all of you who founded it. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just close us out in a quick prayer. Oh God, you have entrusted us with the care of this earth. We confess that we have not always been faithful stewards. Please forgive us for our negligence and our exploitation of your creation. Grant us wisdom and strength to be better caretakers of this earth, to continue this work, to live in harmony with nature, and to protect the vulnerable. May your spirit inspire us to act with justice and compassion. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Much blessings to everyone. Next week, next Movement Cafe, I'll see y'all then, and you know where we are. So hurrah, 5 years, 5 wonderful years. Just the beginning.